It has been 6 years since Boston College has defeated Syracuse. They got that monkey off their back tonight.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, Eagles Nation. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black, editor and publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. There's been some big hurdles that have been in BC's way over the last 5 to 6 years as they've tried to figure out a way to get this program back on their feet. And beating Syracuse has been one of those monkeys that they just cannot shed. They lost 6 years in a row, 11 games. And finally tonight, Boston College goes ahead and wins 80-75 at home at Conte Forum. And in attendance at tonight's game was Beacon Street Ball, who's here to talk about tonight's game. Beak, how's it going?
It's going. Like you said, it has been a long time since this program beat Syracuse. I don't really know why that is. I don't particularly think, really for at least the last couple of years, Syracuse has been all that much better than BC, but it's just been a hurdle that BC couldn't get over. But tonight, pretty much dominant for the last 25, 30 minutes, and they get the win. Final score is a little tighter, but with relative ease, I would say.
Yeah, so the game starts off, BC jumps out to a 7-2 lead. And we see Quinton Post and Jaden Zachary finally score some points against Syracuse after both of them putting up goose eggs last time they played the Orange. It was nice to see them get the things going. But then Syracuse battles back. They start to take over the game, and it looks like it just felt like this game was going to start to slip away. But credit to the Eagles, they go on a 14-0 run to end the first half, and then a 7-0 run to start the second half to kind of pull away. What changed to get BC back in this game?
Yeah, you know what? I think I don't know if they were ever out of it, and obviously they gave up that big run there as Syracuse, like you said, pulled away. It was 30-23 before that BC run, but I didn't think BC was playing all that bad. They were turning it over a lot, but different than we've seen, at points during the struggles here to start 2024. It was a lot of turnovers where I think they were trying to make the right play. There were a couple like late passes on, cutters to the basket. There were a couple, where Post, I thought, made the right decision trying to make a feed and just, missed the guy. So I didn't think they played all that badly, as compared to maybe how they've played at points here in January. And then things just sort of started to go right. You had a triple by Madsen to get it going, to cut it to 4. And then a really nice dive to the hoop by McLaughlin on a find from Harris to get it back down to 2. And then Chaz hit a pull-up 3. And next thing you know, BC was up. And that's what I sort of alluded to at the beginning, that sort of run there from the 4:24 mark in the first half onward. I thought BC was in control the rest of the way. Really, really steady by, Chaz Kelly. I have been beating the Chaz drum a lot over the past month and a half. I think he is really the key to this team's sort of prolonged offensive success. And, he finishes plus 15 on the game. He's plus 13 in the second half. And, I think it's a testament to the trust that Earl has in Chaz to, trust that he'll make the right read on offense. And that's what this team needs. I think Zachary gets better with Chaz on the floor. I think Claudell certainly is better with Chaz on the floor. And I think, having that 3-guard instead of 2-guard look has really benefited this team. And it's exciting to see, and it was a really good win all around, I thought.
So let's talk about the second half, because I have to say sometimes I'm a skeptical BC basketball follower.
People are.
And BC was up, it was either 12 or 14. I was texting a friend who's not a BC fan, and I was like, I'm going to text you in a little bit to tell you how BC blows this. And I watched the start of the second half, and they jump out to that bigger lead. And you see Syracuse, all of a sudden they go on a heater that didn't see, and like it wasn't like BC was like missing defensive assignments or losing guys. They were
Yeah.
just hitting everything,
Yep.
and with guys in their face. JJ Starling, Judah Mintz, they're all just, and of course Malik Brown starts getting hot again, and you watch that lead start to dwindle away. And luckily for BC, the offense kind of kept it in check a little bit,
Yep.
but that was quite the comeback from Syracuse, and the fans there seem very vocal for both sides.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I look at it and you make a really good point, right? And that's probably the biggest difference from tonight. Definitely from like the Virginia Tech game or even the Carolina game, I think are the two that stand out to me where, as the other team began making, let's just call it tough shot after tough shot, BC was able to respond. I thought they did a really good job, even though Syracuse was, maybe scoring at a slightly faster clip and was definitely cutting into that lead. I thought BC did a good job of keeping them at arm's length. You had, a couple good hoops by Zachary there that I thought really pushed it back, most notably when Syracuse got it all the way down to 4. Zachary made a tough little jumper there with about 10 minutes left. And, I think that speaks to the maturity of this BC team or maybe the belief that they have. I saw Zachary talk a little bit about it in the post game, but, this is a team that I think still has a good amount of belief in each other. And that's what you like to see. But, in the second half there, it can really boil down to as simple as, Claudell Harris really did put him on his back and sort of pull away. And that's what BC needs is guys who can make shots.
Yeah, and down the end, it was Claudell Harris who had 11 straight points for BC, which was, and we'll talk more about him in a minute. But let's talk about just they ended up pulling off the win. Syracuse at the end of the game, they go towards pressure, and it looked like BC was starting to crack. Claudell,
Yep.
Chaz Kelly had some issues trying to get the ball forward.
Yep.
But they were able to do enough just to win. How did BC close it out?
Yeah, I think, and I'd probably, I was there, so I think you get caught up in the emotion a little bit, but I never was all that concerned. Now, BC got some big favors by the fact that Syracuse just couldn't hit a free throw to save their lives tonight. So that does deserve to be mentioned, but I liked the switch for Zachary triggering the inbound. I thought that was good. I liked what they did where it was sort of Zachary would pass it in, it would go right back to Zachary, and then they would have, at least down the stretch, it was Claudell on one basically wing and then Chaz on the other wing, and it gave him a good amount of options of where to throw the basketball. So they did have a couple issues, but I did think the press break was much better than we've seen at times earlier this season, and I do give the coaching staff a good amount of credit for making that switch to Zachary triggering the inbound, because I thought that added a certain level of composure. We've seen Madsen struggle. We saw it at the end of the first half. There have been guys, I use Madsen just because of that instance at the first half tonight, but where they have struggled to just get the ball in bounds, let alone break the press. And I think the switch to Zachary there was a good move by the coaching staff, and it ultimately, benefited, and BC closed it out and picked up, a really good win.
Yeah, in a moment, we're going to talk about two of the stars of this game. One who we were just talking about, Claudell Harris, but I want to talk with Beak about Chaz Kelly as well, and get into why I thought he was one of the stars of the game and why he deserves a little bit more discussion in terms of his role on this team. We'll get into that in just a moment. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your football snacks, and placing some super bets. I love buffalo wings, and I'm getting better and better at making them. I'm going to try air frying them this year. I'm wondering how that's going to come out, but we'll check that out. But FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets on which player will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. Honestly, FanDuel is so easy to use. You can just go on there right now. You can find the bets that you want, make your wagers, and you get paid out pretty quickly. So new customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black, and I'm here with Beacon Street Ball. We're chatting about a win that was desperately needed by Boston College. Before we get into this next segment, Beak, as someone who loves this program, how big of a win was this?
I think from a program perspective, it's a big win. And I don't think, like I said at the jump, right, I don't think Syracuse is all that good. But I do think that Syracuse is a team that, for whatever reason, has had BC's number. And it's one of those things that I think at the end of the year, you're going to look back no matter what the final record is. And you're going to be able to say, you know what, we finally beat Syracuse. We picked off Notre Dame twice. We beat a pretty good St. John's team. And that would be with no statement wins for the last month and a half here. So I think it's a good win. I think it vaults this team back into the discussion of an NIT berth. I think that's probably the ceiling right now. And, given how January started, I actually feel pretty good about where we're at, and got a really good opportunity a week from today to beat another pretty good Florida State team and sort of build on the momentum heading into the final stretch.
And I haven't had a chance to talk to you in a couple of weeks, but I think a lot of folks, myself included, get caught in that, we're losing Quinton Post next year. Things are going to fall off a cliff. But the more I watch Devin McLaughlin, the more I feel comfortable that this team has a pretty good base going into next year. Every play he makes, he just seems to grow every game. And he's become, was he the sixth most efficient player in the ACC? Is that what I heard?
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with you. There is definitely a faction of BC basketball fans who think that, this is sort of the quote unquote peak. And I can see why you would think that, because I do think Post is, even on his off games, I think people, a casual fan maybe misses a lot of the ways that he alters the game. But I agree with you. I think you could be looking next year. I think Prince Aligbe has really come on the last 3 or 4 games. And I really like the idea of a starting lineup that is, Devin at the 5. He's a little undersized, but he rebounds so well. Prince slots into his sort of natural 4. Chaz runs the point, and then you got a host of guard options. I expect Claudell to be back, so you put Claudell at the 2, and then, if Zachary comes back, he can play that other guard slot. Madsen has another year of eligibility, obviously Donald Hand. So there's a lot of options there for BC. And I think, if all goes right, I don't really think the expectations next year should be all that different than they are or were going into this year.
Now, let's talk about Claudell, who has been much maligned, and not to say rightfully so, because you hate bashing on a kid for the way he plays, but as hot as he looked for a couple months there, he regressed quite a bit over a couple of weeks stretch. And to see him come on, and I mean, he was hitting some high difficulty shots and hit them all to win this game. It was nice to see him turn things around.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first and foremost, obviously you're right. He had struggled mightily. I'm looking here. The sort of 5 games prior to this, he had only made 7 shots on about 30 attempts. So obviously the numbers there, not very good. Sorry, that's actually from 3. So about 7 out of 30 attempts from 3, even worse overall. But I think it's 2 things. One, I think very big props to him for trusting that, he can still get hot and having that self-belief. I think you see a lot of college players, especially these, sort of mid-tier guys. The super elite kids don't struggle with this, but it's as much of a mental game as it is a physical game. They sort of lose faith in, their ability to hit shots, and rather than just going up in rhythm, they wait a little long. And I think, we've seen guys on BC with that struggle this year, and we've seen it historically, but I thought, especially against Virginia Tech and against Notre Dame, I really did think he did a good job of staying in rhythm. He missed a lot of shots in that Virginia Tech game, but he really stayed with it. And then obviously tonight you see it all come together, and he just comes out. And like you said, I think he had, I'm looking here, it looks like he had about 14 points in about 3.5 minutes. And that's what he gives this team, is that spark plug microwave offense. And, I could not agree with you more that he's hitting shots that are they're tough shots. I don't care who you are. They are tough shots, and he's making them with ease.
Yep. And when he gets going, it's fascinating to watch how much more confident the offense looks around him.
Yes.
Because you have a guy that can stretch the floor. You have a guy that, he brings a little swagger to that offense and a little bit of offensive juice that, Quinton Post does that when he gets hot too, but it's a different thing when you have a guard that can do that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think the offense just looks so much better. And it starts with the fact that defenses have to basically guard Claudell from, 30 feet out on the catch. And I think they look to help a little bit more. And so when he gets going downhill, he did a really good job in this game too. I don't know the plays off the top of my head, but I thought he did a really good job of getting downhill and getting into that mid-range, and where he had been pulling up, he was looking to make a pass. And I think that's just more growth and more confidence. And I really liked what I saw out of him tonight. And I think even if he makes half of those threes there, I think it just shows that that's the type of offense BC needs to be running in order to be, successful on a consistent basis.
And, the guard play was good. Obviously, your second leading scorer was Jaden Zachary, who had some big shots and obviously hit some big free throws down the stretch again.
Yep.
Another game where he hit the shots that he needed to down the stretch to win that. But I also wanted to talk about Chaz. Chaz Kelly, seeing more and more playing time. Again, I haven't had you on since he's been inserted back into the starting lineup. What is he? His stat sheet doesn't show a ton because he doesn't take a ton of shots. But what does he do to this offense that makes him worthy of being in the starting lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest thing is he takes the ball out of Zachary's hands, which has proven to help Zachary, a ton. Because I think what we've unfortunately learned about Zachary is that he has a tendency where he can sort of get the opposition on his hip, but he can't get by him. And that's okay. That's totally fine. But that's really tough to make shots with consistently when you're, an undersized point guard, especially in the ACC. So by moving Zachary off the ball, what it does is it allows Zachary to use his first step, which I think is pretty good, and sort of get by and get a full step on guys sort of on the wing. And, it's opened up Zachary's offense a lot. I think the second thing it does is Zachary has had a real issue turning the ball over this year. The numbers aren't as bad as, a lot of guards in this league, but they're bad by his standards. And so I think this offense was sort of predicated on not turning the ball over a lot. And they did a really good job with that, to start the year, and then they've got away with it. They were really bad tonight. But Chaz has done a really, really good job of taking care of the ball. And he also doesn't take a lot of bad shots. There are, I think a lot of people looked at the first, 2 or 3 games of the year, and Chaz was really bad. And I think people didn't realize that as he continued to play, he never turned it over more, and he didn't really miss a lot of shots. Like tonight, he plays 30 minutes. He's 3 for 3, 7 points, 4 assists, and only turns it over twice. And one of those really wasn't his fault. And that's about as consistent as you can get for a guy playing 30 minutes a night. And not to mention the fact that, he was guarding Judah Mintz, who is by far Syracuse's best player, and he was being guarded by Judah Mintz, who is also, in my opinion, Syracuse's best defender. So I am as in on Chaz as possible. And to sort of anyone who sort of doubts Chaz, I'm a big believer in the plus minus stat. Chaz finishes tonight plus 15, which is a team high. And that's, that's a big, big difference from some of the other guys who I won't name names. But if you dive into the plus minus, it's a big difference. But some other guys who are getting similar runs. So, I give Earl a lot of credit for giving Chaz, the starts, and it's paid off so far. They're 2-1, and I really did think they had a shot to win that Virginia Tech game. So I like where they're at. All
right. In our last segment, to wrap things up, we're going to look at where BC's at. They have a week off, but where are the Eagles where they're supposed to be at? Are they behind? I want to get Beek's full thoughts on that in just a moment. Now, I need to talk to you. I know we come to sports to escape some of the crazy realities of life, but can we just talk a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if my wife or one of my kids got sick with a supply chain issue kept keeping them from life-saving medications they need. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, amongst others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to Jace Medical and use promo code Locked On to get $20 off your order. Wrapping things up here on Locked On Boston College, I'm your host, AJ Black, joined by Eagle Insider writer Beacon Street Ball, who was at the game today. And again, big win. And beating Syracuse is always a good feeling. I remember when they beat Syracuse when they were number one. I think, was that the last win when they were number one?
I don't know if it was the last one, but that's one of those games that is forever etched in my mind. That was a huge win.
So I have to say, I'm going to age myself here. The biggest win I ever saw in any sport, the best game I've ever saw, was BC and Syracuse in 2005. I think it was when BC started off 20-0, and they beat Syracuse at home. And I think that was a team that had Hakeem Warwick, and I think they were ranked 6 or 7. Best game as a student I ever went to. But again, I'm aging myself again. So let's talk about where BC's at. You know, a rough couple games in the middle there, some potential wins that they should have had. But when you beat, you're starting to pick up some wins. You got Florida State coming up. How do you think BC kind of stands right now? And are they where they should be, or are they kind of behind where you would like them to be?
I think they're definitely behind where I would like them to be, given how they started the year. The two games that stand out to me that are really missed opportunities are the Syracuse road game, in which I thought both teams were terrible, and I thought BC had a chance to pull it out, and they just couldn't get over that hump. And then that Virginia Tech game a week ago tonight, in which I don't think Virginia Tech's very good at all. And again, I thought BC, had a chance to sort of, again, get over that hump. And if you split there, then you're 5-5, and you're sitting where now currently that would be 8th in the ACC. So the one thing I will say though, and we're halfway through the ACC slate, and I think BC has a real opportunity to make a bit of a run here. So coming up, you've got Florida State at home, then they go to Duke, then Louisville, Miami at home, they go back to Florida State, and they go to NC State. So of those 6 games there, if BC can find a way to win 4 out of 6, that would improve them to 8-8 in the ACC, which would be a pretty good spot to be at, because their final games after that are Virginia at home, team they beat last year in basically the same date. Pittsburgh at home. Pitt's been struggling. I know they beat Duke, but they just can't figure it out on offense. At Miami, and then at a really bad Louisville team. So long short of the story is, I do think that there is a chance that this BC team can still win 20 games. And I would take that any day of the week, 5 days on Sunday, whatever that saying is, because this is a team that unfortunately, after that loss to Clemson, was really, really deep in. They've done a good job of righting the ship here, 2-2 or 3-2 in their last 5. And I think the goal, has to be, I said this earlier, I think the goal has to be the NIT. And I think, given how many middling teams there are in the ACC, that's probably going to be at the end of the ACC tournament, 21 wins, I think is probably going to get you in. And I think this BC team, barring disaster, should have a really good shot of making that happen.
Yeah, it's been a fun season. And that's the thing with Earl Grant's teams too. Like, it's every college sports game, when you watch it and you're in that moment, it feels like that's it. And after the game is over, you're thinking to yourself, well, that made or broke the entire season. But when you take a step back and you look at how seasons kind of progress, especially basketball when it's longer, football's a little different, it can change. And we saw BC go through a hot streak last year. And I feel like there's enough talent on this team right now. And Grant said it, I just saw the post-game press conference quotes again, that they still haven't reached their potential. And I still think that they could still do that. And if they do, as you said, 2021 wins is not out of the question.
Yeah. And I think, I really do. I've got some pretty good intel that tells me that, pretty much everyone in the program, this was an NCAA tournament team. And that was sort of the plan, and how they built the schedule, and, sort of how they kept Claudell out of games and stuff like that. And, I don't think the NCAA tournament's going to happen. But what I do think is that if this BC team, you beat Florida State and you beat Duke, we're sitting in early February or mid-February, I guess that would be, because February is so short. And you're still playing for an NCAA tournament berth. If they can win the next two, it's a long shot, but you're playing for it. And that's something that we haven't seen in 15 years. And so I give Earl a ton of credit. And even if this team wins 20 games, 21 games, and they make the NIT and that's how this season ends, I don't think you can look at it and say it's a failure. I think there will be a lot of what ifs, but I also think you got to look at it and say, listen, given where this team was when Earl Grant got hired, team winning 21 games is pretty impressive in year 3.
And right, as we started off this whole conversation with, the future still looks bright if they can continue to build off of this.
Yep,
like
exactly.
You're losing Quinton Post, which I think a lot of folks are going to have a hard time just understanding how that's a big deal, but you have a lot coming up.
Yeah.
And always remember, Earl Grant. I don't want to say this because I feel like it's setting up Earl Grant to fail, but the transfer portal could also help you there too.
Yeah, I mean, I not to cut you off there, but I do think they've got a pretty good formula for the type of guy that they want. I use Bickerstaff as an example too, right? Bickerstaff didn't work here, but it was still the right type of guy to bring in. You get a guy, big body, a couple years left, and I think that's what Earl's going to be looking for. I don't know who the names are and who they'll be looking at because obviously the portal's not open and we don't know who's going to transfer. But I think you have to have a pretty good trust in Earl that transfer-wise he'll be able to bring in somebody who can make an impact and he'll be able to sell BC. I don't think BC's that difficult to sell right now in basketball. And every game that Claudell plays well and every game that Post plays well and every game that Madsen plays well is just more sort of ammunition when it comes to portal time.
All right, let's wrap things up here. So, Beak, where can people find you?
Yeah, definitely. So Twitter is the main spot. It's at Beacon ST Ball. I appreciate everybody who follows. Recaps after the games over on Eagle Insider. I also am slowly putting together a longer form article, sort of looking at sort of how this team stacks up historically. I don't know exactly when I'll put it out, but I think it's pretty interesting to compare this team to some other teams over the last 20, 25 years. So that's the stuff. Follow along there. I really appreciate everybody who does follow along and get a week off, and so you won't get as much of me for the next week. But I think BC and BC Athletics is in a really good spot right now.
Yeah, much better than just much better than the last couple of years. So that's always a good thing.
Amen.
Right? So
exactly.
So let's we'll be back again tomorrow as we continue our trek towards the weekend. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Follow me there and Eagle Insider. And if you're listening to this and you like it, please like this episode, share with friends. If you're an everyday person who listens to this every day, I want to thank each and every one of you. If this is the first time you've checked out Locked On BC, welcome. We do this every day. I've done 805 episodes now, which is insane. Talking about BC sports that much, I think is in the DSM for mental illness. So that's where I'm at. I love it. But this is what we're doing. So thank you all so much for listening and for checking out Locked On Boston College, your team every day.